stops me from going through these things twice. I've seen nights and I've turned my back. I hear the train coming, I stay right on the track. In the middle, in the middle, in the middle of the tree. I've lost my shirt, I've pawned my rings. I've done all the dumb. I've melted wax to fix my wings. I've done all the dumb. And I threw my hat into the ring. I've done all the dumb. And I thought that I just had to sing. I've done all the dumb.
That's okay, we got lots of what's behind us. My name is Kevin Fitzgerald and we're No Apology. We're a Christian band that likes to get out and minister to people, and we use the best form we know how. For all of us, we're musicians, so we use music. And God has had a lot to say through our music over the years, and so now we're really feeling blessed to actually share that with people. The first song we sang wasn't one of ours, but all the others have been. But the first song was written by Paul Kelly, and it illustrates that in life we've all done a lot of really dumb things, okay? Particularly with our relationship with God. In the Christian vernacular, we call it sin. But if you're a non-Christian here and you don't really catch that concept, sin is just doing something wrong against God, fouling it up, doing something stupid. Okay? We serve a very loving God. And when He comes into your life, you change. You can't help but change. You actually go from black to white. Yeah, have fun. Sometimes I really wonder if the world can comprehend the way that Christ can change someone and you begin without an end. I know what's special about is what I used to say. Oh, I wanna change my life and I'll be living in my way. Turn to find out what you like is all about. Saying how heaven lies in His hands and you come from black to white. I said you come from black to white. So the world began to sink, going nowhere really fast. There was the drinking, the drugs, and the rock and the roll. How long did it last? One feeling every weekend, let's party to the end. If you abuse yourself, then you won't see that you're living in misery. When you turn to find out what your life is all about. Saying how heaven lies in His hands and you come from black to white. This is called When We're All Not Ready and I Didn't Look, so sorry about that. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
My designated talking time, just so Kev can change guitars. And now I have to sing to you, so I'm sorry.
That's why he's a
This next song is for probably the much younger in the room. Anyone heard of DC Talk? Jesus Freak. Marked by my maker, a peculiar display. The high and lofty is seeming as we, but I won't live and die from the power they see. With us in his head, exactly he walked was also his bed. The words that he spoke, but the people assumed wasn't too much stuff.
pleasure to speak again. The next song is called The Standard, and it basically tries to work through issues like what is right and what is wrong, what is morality, and the injustices in life.
You're actually the first audience to ever hear this song, so you can let us know what you think at the end.
Alone on the sideline, without any guidelines. She's a hero in this place. The streets are all empty, not a soul sees the hurt that's on her face.
Right and wrong has been blurred, and now it means our faith is stirred.
She sees there's another way that leads out through the day, but it's what's right or wrong for her.
She's going on the wrong side of town, so she falls to the ground and she screams.
Is there a standard? Is there a line or in rain? Is there a place where justice will never last again? Is there a normal place where a beating heart will get thrown out of its rain? Is there a hero in this place?
Oh yeah.
Alone on the corner, so far from home now. They beat and send him away. His body was trembling, it's been so long since the devil stung his vein.
This isn't what life was meant to be. There's a way there that he can't see.
There is a standard. There is a line or in rain. There is a place where justice will never last again. There is a noble place where a beating heart will get thrown out of its race. There is a hero in this place.
Jesus is the hero. On the keyboards we've got Rob Johnson.
The only answer lays in nail his hands that can wipe your wrongs away. And when you know you'll be rearranged, the world is changing, life will change. There's one thing that will be the same. There is a love, there is a peace, there is a calm that brings release. He is the hope, He is the peace, He is the calm that brings release. He is the hope, He is the peace, He is the calm that brings release.
The next song we're going to do is not one of ours. It's by the Newsboys, if anyone likes them. And it shows that Well, in reality, what Christ offers us is really a renewal of life, and it really chronicles almost a prodigal son and letters home to his parents.
Thanks guys, you're a legend, Kev. Even though we've got no apology with us tonight, I've got to start by actually giving an apology. The reason that Jen and I were almost 20 minutes late was because we had a stationary bingle before we left for church tonight, and that made us just a little bit late. You'll hear all about the details sometime anyway. Well, you will now anyway. Yeah, I just should have been here on time or early to actually, on behalf of Baulkham Babs, welcome no apology. I've already given my apologies for being late. I also give Derek's apologies for not getting a mosh going when he had the opportunity. I'm really disappointed in you, mate. I'll speak to you later about that, Dad.
It's alright, later on we'll move some chairs.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, you've got to lead by example, Dad. When Kevin wrote to me a few weeks ago to say that there's a possibility that No Apology might be able to come along, I thought probably he had in mind maybe this time next year. But these guys have put themselves out and made an extra special effort to be here this side of Christmas. So we want you guys to know that we really, really appreciate the trouble and the time that you've taken to be here today. I said at the Boys and Girls Brigade presentation on Wednesday night that my kids tell me that I'm old enough, you might not believe this, but I'm old enough to know or to remember that it was cool to be cool. But it's not cool to be cool anymore. You got it. Well, no, I'm sorry, mate. You might be right on that, mate. My kids tell me it's no longer cool to be cool. We went from cool to sick, and now you're fat. P-H-A-T, okay? So it's cool to be fat, and I think that you'd agree with me that these guys are really fat. So thanks for coming. Two other things. For any guests or visitors that might be here tonight that don't normally join us, next Sunday night we don't have nightlife. We've got the regular carols by candlelight in the Roxburgh Park Whaling Reserve just down the road here. So please come along 7:30 for carols by candlelight. And our Christmas morning service is at 9 o'clock, again not here, at Crestwood High School Auditorium. Thanks guys.
I can't wait to tell my doctor it's cool to be fat. we're going to actually tone down for a little bit now, so lots of you will probably say yes. We're going to do some quieter numbers. And then we brought someone with us tonight, a really gifted evangelical speaker by the name of Heath Wiley. And so he's going to come and just share with you briefly about what Jesus has done, for those of you who don't know. And for those of you who do know, you can always do the refresher course. So, but we'll get more into that a bit later. The next song is called Restless Heart. And I don't remember how the words actually came to me. I didn't write the words to this one. A friend did. And I don't remember why he gave them to me, but he did. And we wrote the music. And it's just the struggle that we go through.
Wasn't hard to find that way.
Sorry, I forgot to mention in that song that tinkling the plastics up the back there is one of the finest keyboard players you'll find. So give me a round of applause, he was really good. This next song again is a struggle, and it's one I'm going to admit to whether it makes me popular or not. I have a real struggle in my Christianity. To give you a bit of background, there's a very strong occultic base in my family. One entire side of my family is very, very heavily involved in the occult. I knew it was wrong. It just didn't make sense, okay? The spirits and things that they dealt with were bent on destruction and wrecking you. And I didn't want a part of that. And so I became a Christian in 1986, which is like 12 years ago. It's funny how the time passes. And 2 years ago I wrote this song, In a Real Struggle, because I found one of the major differences is I can pray to God and sometimes feel like I'm praying just to an empty space. I really struggle with the fact that I don't hear an audible reply. I don't feel a physical touch. And it's different in the occult world. You can do a spell and summon up a demon and that will actually physically appear, and there'll be smoke and tables rising and all the sorts of things you've seen in Poltergeist, I guess. But God remains sometimes unnervingly silent, or at least I find. And when the trouble hits me is when I really need to know it. When the trouble hits me is when I really need to feel a physical hand. And just to know more than in my head that He's there, and more than in my heart that He's there. And that's what this song's called, I Need You Now. How many of you would like me to tune up first?
Sometimes it's lonely, this walk you've called me to, and my body at each trudging stand laments we won't get through.
cultural gap. The new ones will know it as DC Talk, the old ones will know it as Larry Norman. Have fun. You can work out which you are.
Filled with guns and war, and all of us are trampled on the floor. I wish we'd all be ready. The children died, the dead grew cold, a piece of bread by a bag of gold. I wish we'd all be ready. There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind. Man and wife asleep in bed. She hears a noise and turns her head. He's gone. I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill. One disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready. There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind. Time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind. There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind. I wish we'd all been ready. I wish we'd all been ready. I wish we'd all been ready.
Thanks. We're just going to play the first verse and chorus of that song again. If the stewards would like to come forward to collect the offering and the response cards, that'd be great. Do we actually have stewards here tonight? All the things I didn't think to organise. Alright, we'll start playing and someone will designate themselves a steward. Here we go. I'll start this side on the back. Sitting in the beat seat, we have the newest member of the band, Paul Crawford. Sorry, we're making changes up here.
I figured the Chuck Berry.
See, I have a lack of brain cells, but they were all up ahead of me, so... Okay, in the middle here, the foundation for the band, giving all the solid bass grooves, we have Mr. Phil Thorne. Tickling the plastics, as I mentioned before, from Wollongong, or actually Otford, we have Brock Johnson. Across the front, on lead guitar, vocals, songwriting, and everything else you could possibly imagine, we have Lindy. The one we could easily say is the best looking girl in the band. And certainly one of the greatest voices I've heard in a long time, the Deep Bets. Our sound tech and lighting tech, who you normally don't get to hear from and see, we have Steve Betts up the back, and Darren Abraham's down here on lights. I'm Kevin Fitzgerald. We're all fallible Christians, but we're saved by Jesus' grace. The last thing Jesus said as he left the planet was a command. Well, actually, no, it was a commission. I don't know the difference between the two, but I can only imagine that a commission is greater than a command because it doesn't say please afterwards. And Jesus' great commission was to go into all the world and make disciples of all men. And here it is in rock and roll form. This one. That's it, Jingo.